Why which label?
Junior label. Alright. Hi everyone! Welcome in round 7 of EUDC. My name is Claudia. I'll be chairing this round. I will have the panelists with me from my left to my right. Let's sit them, please.
Hi, Patrick here.
Awesome, let's do the team's introduction, starting from OG.
Rick speaking first, your name. Wow.
Almost speaking.
Thank you. Oh.
I got first note for pronounce, I'm going to second key. Thank you.
CG.
My way.
Sia.
Johan speaking first, Devin speaking second.
You had on first, okay, second. Okay, thank you. That being said, best of luck to all teams, and we are ready to call the PM to open the debate.
And are we ready? Consolidation of the music industry has hurt both artists and consumers alike. It has also stifled artistic freedoms greatly. This is something that we have to regret. I want to first talk about what the concept is likely to look like. I think A, multiple smaller records will have a more even share of the market. You're likely going to see a more monopolistically competitive market rather than the oligopolistic market that we see in the status quo. This is the most likely counterfactual because I think each record label has to compete to push up their musicians and try to differentiate to appeal to different niche markets, but at the same time they have slightly less access to capital and resources than these conglomerates have. I think this is radically different from the status quo because in the 21st century, with huge amounts of internet proliferation, with the rise of Western capital, with the rise of capitalist incentives, consolidation on the side of opposition has to occur on a far greater intensity, which means the conglomerates are very, very powerful, and this is something that ultimately undercuts the artistic freedoms as well as the welfare of artists. I'm going to bring to you two arguments. Number one, why consolidation of the music industry has hurt smaller artists, and number two, why it has hurt consumer choice. One, why it has hurt smaller artists? No. For artists who have joined the label, I think conglomerates are just heavily profit motivated. Very much so more than the record labels who oftentimes have the ability and the interest to appeal to more niche market and loyal consumer bases. Crucially, a lot of these conglomerates want to cater to as wide of a base as possible because they want to be able to appeal to as many people as possible to get as much profit. So the impact is therefore that they oftentimes try to mainstream to make their music as mainstream as possible, to popify their artists, or to market them in a specific way that appeals to a large proportion of the younger generation, for example, while at the same time inhibiting their artistic freedom. So for example, this looks like when they forced Justin Timberlake to leave and sing, and he hasn't had a good album since. This is when the K-pop industry just gets homogenized into one trope of music, but singers are unable to pursue things like indie music, for example. I want to talk about why this is independent impact on artistic freedoms. Note that this has a long-term intergenerational impact. It undercuts incentives for individuals and artists, not only within the industry, within these conglomerates, also outside these conglomerates, to develop the way to develop original music. That is to say, this oftentimes hurts consumer choice because artists within these industries often has the incentive to appeal to this thing so that they can get the marketing, so that they get the support from the conglomerates to be able to distribute their music widely, whereas artists outside the industry want to appeal to these conglomerates to break into the industry, into the very first place, to get scouted and to be identified as individuals who can potentially market their music out. I think this has a huge principle injustice. Number one, to artists who are supposed to be given the most capacity and freedom to bring out the best art they can. This is something that ultimately hurts artists very greatly in their debut, especially because this is a career that they embarked on because they wanted to be able to pursue these artistic freedoms. They wanted to be given the capacity to pursue the best music they can. But moreover, I think this also just hurts consumer choice. And look here, the delta might seem intangible, it might seem small, but music oftentimes has long pernicious impacts on things like our quality of life, on possible outcomes for social change, on our ability to tap the different disenfranchised, marginalized groups, etc., I think you cannot underestimate the impact of that. Secondly, I think it also creates heavy discrimination within the industry. Number one, when the most marketable musicians are with arbitrarily distributed characteristics, like having better look or just appearing to be more marketable compared to these conglomerates, oftentimes they are the ones who are promoted and they appeal to the broader populations as a whole. But secondly, oftentimes the people who benefit from the things that O is likely to talk about, the fact that they have more marketing capacity, for example, or the fact that they can distribute their music more, for example, when there's conglomerization. Number one, they are not necessarily most deserving of this for the reasons I've given to you just now. But secondly, even if they had the advantage of having music that appeals to larger tastes, oftentimes this crowds out individuals who have music that appeals to more niche tastes as well, but not unjustly called out of the market. But secondly, within the conglomerates as well, smaller musicians suffer because they don't get the airtime they deserve, because oftentimes the large profit incentive of these markets oftentimes appeals to the more famous and the more marketable musicians. The comparative therefore is that record labels oftentimes have the incentive to care about artistic freedoms more. Number one, they have the ability to appeal to more niche consumer markets so they can support a greater diversity of music. But secondly, I think they have fewer artists as a whole. So each individual artist has a more significant impact on their profit margins. There's just a greater incentive to number one, be able to care for them, but number two, be able to monitor their progression, to be able to intricately follow their career progression and support them every step of the way. Before I move on to how it affects artists outside the label, I'll take closing.
Yeah, if going after niche it's more appealing, why would the big studios not do that in the first place?
Number one, because the record labels number one, because the conglomerates that you're talking about oftentimes appeal have the incentive to mainstream their music, to make it as copified as possible. Whereas on the other hand, when you have record labels, you oftentimes have the ability to target more specific markets because you can still gain a profit margin from these markets. So therefore, you can see record labels that focus exclusively on indie music, on country music, for example. These are things that allow more diversity of music choices, but also allow more artists of different music tastes to have their music promoted onto the wider scale. Secondly, how does it hurt artists outside the label? No, conglomeracy dominates the market. There is significant barriers to entry to enter the music market now. To break into the market, no, you will have to be scouted. You have that significant level of clout in the status quo as well. But in the comparative, I think it would have been easier for you to be scouted and identified for having some kind of talent in some niche areas of music that these record labels believe that they can market to certain populations. But secondly, these conglomerates oftentimes dominate the airwaves, advertisements, social media, etc. That's why the level channels oftentimes have the most number of subscribers, which means that oftentimes as an artist with very, very unique taste trying to break into the market, it's just so goddamn difficult to be able to get your music to even be able to compete with the more dominant forms of music in terms of airtime. This is how many people even listen to it in the very first place. I think this oftentimes hurts the artists who have, number one, the least privilege and the least advantage to be able to gain the level of social connections needed to even go into these conglomerates in the very first place. I think these artists also oftentimes have the most unorthodox music that caters to the most controversial taste or the most unique taste that oftentimes don't get the platform that opening opposition or closing opposition will try to force. Lastly, why does this hurt consumer choice? Note here that this is just a very basic economic argument. When you have conglomerates, there is greater market power. Market power leads to a shit ton of things that hurt consumer choice as well as for record artists. Number one, there's oftentimes huge price fixing between different oligopolies. That's why oligopolistic markets oftentimes have sticky prices because they want to increase or decrease their prices too much because oftentimes this will hurt them. So they set all three of these record labels set prices high, and sometimes this hurts consumer choices in terms of things like streaming deals, for example, in terms of things like Spotify subscriptions, for example. This just has a huge welfare impact on consumers. But secondly, I think they oftentimes have the ability to have more asymmetric contracts with their musicians as well as compared to the smaller record labels who oftentimes have to compete to offer a better deal to their record labels. I think number one, it reduces music choice for consumers, but number two, it also hurts all these artists. For all of the harms that I've talked to you just now, we greatly regret this motion.
Thank you very much to the Prime Minister. Very happy to go leader of the opposition.
speech in 3, 2, 1. I knew UCLA were scared of Israelis, but I didn't know they were so scared that they wouldn't take a clarification for 6 whole minutes of their speech. I'm going to have 2 cases in my speech. First, on finances, why there's a lack of income in the music industry and why we need to utilize integration in order to profit more. And second, why we get more incentive and capacity to innovate and promote new artists and genres on our side. First, just a bit of framing on the comparative. The motion is also of larger record labels and the conglomeration. They admit that their alternative is small regional labels, such as ones that are located to Tokyo. This forces closing to follow the same. On our side, we have the massive conglomerates who are external to music, like Sony and Universal, who we think are the only ones who can do acquisitions and get to the mass scale that we need. Let's get into my first argument on finances. I want to start with analyzing the problem of why it's so hard to make money in the music industry. The biggest reason is pirating, which is easier than ever. First, all music is made and mastered digitally, so there's no loss of quality if I listen to it on music. I can download high files if I want, and there's no scratches. Second, I have high-speed internet versus LimeWire, so I can download albums in a click of my thumbs. Third, it is far easier to defend against viruses if you use a YouTube to MP3 converter or even just Windows Defender. And fourth, it's a non-tangible product. Unlike old records, I'm not purchasing something physical that I get to own. I'm not willing to pay for it. I would download a car if I could, but I also feel like I'm not downloading a car because it doesn't take any effort to produce as far as I'm concerned, the specific copy I'm taking. But the second reason beyond piracy is that there's large competition with other free and accessible content, like YouTube, like amateur music that's made for free, like high-quality movies and TV streaming on VOD or Netflix. What are the implications of this? There is very low income from view counts and streaming, especially for the small artists who get stiffed by Spotify. But second, high income only comes from things like concerts, from things like collaborations and movie soundtracks, and from eking out what profit you can by negotiating with Spotify and streamlining production. Let's get into my next for solution. I'll take it from closing towards the end of my speech. My first method for solution is negotiations. Look, Ticketmaster have a monopoly over concerts. Anyone who has ever gone to a concert knows this. Spotify have a near monopoly over streaming, and they actively stiff small artists and studios who don't have negotiating power against them, and I will take you at the end of my speech, and therefore don't get paid. Universal, Sony, and Warner each control a quarter of the music world across multiple genres. This means they have immense negotiating power. This means that for Spotify, losing their entire catalog means that they now lack huge and desirable artists like Taylor Swift or Kanye, and that now a competitor of yours, like Apple Music or Tidal, who are willing to sign a profitable deal with Universal, have exclusive control of the access to their streaming and poach millions of listeners from Spotify. The same thing is true for Ticketmaster. Losing all the concert rights to Universal's musicians because you're not offering them enough for it to be profitable, and then you lose a quarter of the market, and then Sony decides to invest in an alternative to Ticketmaster, they actually are able to compete against Ticketmaster and take down their monopolies. This means that the big three get to demand insanely better conditions and higher and fairer returns for their artists, who otherwise get very little or nothing. They're also incentivized to give this to the artists, because otherwise the artists will turn to one of the other big three, so there's competition between them for that. My second method after negotiations is horizontal integration. Movies and games are profitable, and they're primarily owned by Warner Studios, by Sony, who dominate movies, by Universal, who dominate movies, as well as games. These things are incredibly profitable because people do go to the movie theaters to watch them. People do buy physical copies for their Xbox and PlayStation. And now we get the collaborations. Things like Kendrick's album for Black Panther, which means you have access to far better contracts. You're far more likely to have big artists coming on to these movies and video games. I'm definitely not taking you. These movies and video games and selling them for much more money, which means that they get a larger share of that. Finally, we have economies of scale. It's the centralization of resources and expertise. First, we have the best producers. We have the best writers. A singer is only as good as the production value and writing value of the song that they make. When we centralize them, we not only have access to the best ones, but we also make a connection between the right writer and the right producer, between the best artist for them. Second, we have the best PR and legal teams. It's far easier for us to represent the artists. We have the best advertisers. We have the best access to the markets to which we can advertise their songs that we know will like them. And finally, we get better contacts and connections. We get Kendrick to appear on Taylor's Bad Blood song on a feature, even though he otherwise never would, which not only gives us an incredible song, but also means that these people have opportunities and connections that they wouldn't otherwise have. Before I get into my second argument, do I conclude?
The case in opening opposition is Spotify and YouTube pay shit. That is the only alternative that people have because the record labels don't sign them because they have a different style to what the record label wants.
I don't think that's true, and I don't think you'll be able to prove that on the comparative Spotify wouldn't have grown. Let's talk about innovation. I want to prove that we have greater incentives and capacity to innovate and promote new artists and genres on our side. First mechanism, but my first reason is consolidated record conglomerates diversify more from just focusing on a single popular genre like pop or rap. The reason is they don't want to be only competing against themselves. If they already have many strong pop artists, promoting new pop artists is going to harm them, but promoting new metal or dubstep or K-pop artists is going to actively benefit them and allow them to compete in the genres and sectors that they're not currently competing in. This means they have an active incentive to diversify, but secondly, they also are able to do it because they can take the risks required for innovation. Taking the risk on a new genre like trap or synth pop requires first being able to afford and platform many new artists in a genre that doesn't yet have proven success and are often a long-term investment. This is only because at the beginning, few people are going to care about listening to these songs and albums, and only in a decade perhaps, it'll be profitable. But the only people that will take these risks are these larger ones. The third mechanism is that we have far more global music. We're far more likely to bring K-pop or rap to the global masses because we have global supply chains, global platforming, and we're a globally known brand name. So we have a greater capacity and incentive to popularize it. This means we get unique types of enjoyment for people like Tal, my ex-partner, who's addicted to K-pop. It also means we get unique new types of music because suddenly we have K-pop stars rapping. The final mechanism here is that we get new talent. We're far better able to invest in scouting, in platforming, in building a name for them, and most importantly, in giving them features. The best way to grow a new artist is to give big, established artists a feature on their albums or vice versa, which brings in audiences in the first place to give these new artists a chance. For all of these, this is what we know as the Drake effect, for instance. For all these reasons, opening opposition.
Thank you very much, Leader of the Opposition. Very happy to call the Deputy Prime Minister.
The case from the opening government is quite a simple one, and I only need to learn from the poet Kendrick Lamar to summarize it. The case is fuck the big three now, and it's important for a number of reasons, because under the model of consolidation, we've seen the most heinous perversion of one of the most important human institutes of culture and understanding. It is music that has died under consolidation, and opening government are the only team that have the spine to stand behind regretting it. I want to note a few things that directly destroy the opening opposition's case. The first one is that I think the case is trapped in 2006. Piracy is an outdated form of engaging music. Why is this true? On a number of levels. Firstly, the proliferation of free streaming that is easy, accessible, that doesn't require individuals to undergo a legal framework, undergo a legal access to the thing. Sachin has never bought a Spotify premium plan. This man still listens to ads in 2024. Everyone does it because it's easier and they don't have to break the law to do it. But moreover, governments have become significantly greater in cracking down on this. Greater understanding how IP addresses work. Simply more time to deal with it and crack down on it. The other day I tried to stream via BBC iPlayer and the government hit me up with, you don't have a TV license, we know where you live. This is important because people are so unlikely to do these things anymore that they often opt into the most easy option. Things like Disney Plus, things like ad tiers of various streaming platforms. This inherently limits the scale upon the benefit that the opening opposition bring. Second thing, they say that there's an issue of low income to artists. And I want to note here, where the fuck does the claim come from that these large groups pay people well? They're profit maximizing behemoths that at every instance seek to drain you of every bit of cultural value you have, artistic rigor, and then throw you out when you're dry. This is important for a number of reasons. Because the claim in opening government is that they buy you because you're niche, and then they popify you. They make you a bad person. This is what they did to Doja Cat, who was one of the most exciting artists in the world until she was signed to Universal and then delivered one of the three of the most mediocre albums. It was only when she got out of that contract that she went back to her weird self and dropped some banger music. This is important because the claim in opening government is that you fundamentally limit the way impact is done. The closing government gave us a POI that indicates that they don't understand the degree to this case. They say, oh, but then why is there an incentive to activate or not capture each artist? We are saying that it exists, but it's the problem of when they have them and your decision-making calculus is solely based on profit, you force them to operate within the cultural zeitgeist. You force them to move towards the trends of pop. But more than that, it distills and removes the value from art itself. This is the secondary claim, the principal thing that they're here to contend with. The last thing that they say is that there exist reasonable alternatives that function as a method of competition. And they say it's Tidal. Brother, no one is on Tidal besides the 20 audio files in the world. But more than that, Tidal is financially unviable because they're trying to offer deals that are financially irresponsible. That is why in the last few years, individuals have removed their catalog from those places and put them back on Spotify because the games, the streaming wars are over, we know the winners, and they now control the game. So when they speak about reasonable alternatives, firstly they don't exist, but the better conditions were not feasible and ultimately resulted in their financial loss. But then they say that there's some level of competition in the market. I want to know, Rick beautifully preempted this when he says that, like, if there are three big dogs in the game, they don't bite each other, right? They agree that they share the sections of the pie, they find their separate niches, and they simply price fix. Importantly, this is how every oligopoly works. I think the word is oligopoly, I always get confused between them. But this is important because it shows that when you have no incentive to actually think about individuals in like unique cultural lineage, which used to exist in the past. So think about like Atlanta-based rap labels that were uniquely empowering of the Atlanta sound and how it distilled some of the most important music of the 2000s. That doesn't exist anymore because now people like Gunna Gunna and 21 Savage have to be on Drake's records. Just like pacifying their sound, removing the artistic rigor, and ultimately reducing the value of the art. I want to know what this means at the individual level. Because I'm kind of in the debating, I'm the same way. Like sometimes I want to give rhetorically powerful speeches that are beautiful, but they don't win debates. And it feels shit. It feels heartbreaking. Imagine when you dictate your entire life to something, and then you cannot do it in the way you want to. The individual impact is massive and won't be considered highly. Because these people, like Rick says, it has an intergenerational knock-on effect. When you see your favorite artists come up in places like Bandcamp and Patreon, which are honestly the alternatives, bro, if you're saying they're getting paid better on Tidal, my favorite small artist is a Patreon. I give them $10 a month, and the 1,000 other people that like them give them that $10. They have a reasonable salary that bankrolls their life. We live in a digitized age, not in the 2006s that they think we live. So individuals, these small artists have a significantly greater capacity to engage in systems of realistic art that also bankroll them. Bandcamp that allows them to sell their art directly, their albums directly to fans and gain 100% of the profit. These are the mechanisms that have saved the art industry and have preserved the value of music. This is where the opening opposition fails to be engaged. And then they say vertical integration, brother, please, we're talking about the value of art here. Can you imagine saying that Black Panther album was a reasonable artistic intervention for Kendrick Lamar? Honestly, it was his weakest effort. His Untitled Unmastered album was better. It was literally unmastered. This is the difference here. It was an exploitative album that forced Kendrick to go into a space and popify himself. It only functioned not as a vector of exposure, but of exploitation. This is exactly the same trend that we saw in the film industry in the 60s in America of blaxploitation. It is simply the tokenization of these individuals. There's no artistic value, no artistic rigor. I believe it is a secondary principle wrong that they ought to consider. But I want to note here, even vertical integration that they speak about never trickles down. Even if it happens in the way that they say it does, it never benefits these people. They never become significantly benefit. They only are on that thing for a 3-label contract and they're dropped when they're done. You get one single guy from the drill scene in the UK on a record with Kendrick and then he drops off the map because he never made any crossover impact. His fan thinks he's a sellout and he has no vision for any level of artistic rigor. Go ahead, close your government.
Yeah, on our side, the indie artists or the small studios know they can't compete globally and go more niche, meaning we actually get their benefits on our side.
No, dog, you want to Spotify, use Bandcamp, use Patreon, you represent your artistic rigor, you get massive fans. Look at JPEG Mafia, look at 100 Gex, look at King Gizzard and Lizard Wizard. All of these individuals are some of the biggest artists in the world. Why? Because they're stuck to their guns, they step out of the system, they remain indie. This is important because that is the preservation of music, that is the preservation of culture. Two last claims in the opening opposition that we have to destroy. The first is innovation. Honestly, this is just super counterintuitive. It's significantly more likely that individuals will force profit maximize, force some level of homogenization within the scope of these things. But more than that, they speak about global music. I want to note back to the claim that I made a little bit earlier. K-pop as a genre was one of the most exciting in the world. It has now become one of the most exploitative. Think of the individuals who are in these bands and the lives they live. The fact that they have no ability to put any level of personal taste in the artistry. They work incredibly long hours and most times, most of them don't make it big. The few that do live famous lives that are arguably devoid of meaning. Most who don't live broken lives and left behind in the system. The claim in the opening government is quite simple. You fundamentally harm music as an institution for consumers, artists, and the culture being the most important. The last one is to understand that any level of innovation can be preserved in the system through any alternative, but our comparative is the most likely. Panel, at the end of the opening government, you need to note a few things. The value of art and the way in which we conceptualize meaning is not only on the economics, but the way in which we internalize value. That is why you ought to weigh our impacts on principal harms. I'll go back to Kendrick one last time. Fuck the big three, it's just big OG.
Thank you very much for the PM. I'm very happy to call DLO.
Three, two, one. 2 points in this speech. First, why money is big, beautiful, and the most important impact on the ground. Second, why there is more competition, which is literally the precondition, the lack thereof, for any OG impact. It is staggering that they have literally one line in DPN as to why there is no competition today. We will analyze this and be logically precedent to OG's bad conditions by oligopolies. Before that, 2 quick things I want to say about OG to take them out on the impact level before I even engage with competition. First, on artists. Artists are abused. Doja Cat is sad. A few responses. 1, Claudia, what the fuck is the comparative? Did you hear them at any point explain why record labels are better? If they're strapped for cash, what do they do then? They then outprice their artists even more. They even offer worse prices. The manager pressures you to stay in the record office and in the studio more time, because that's when, if they don't get that, the studio will collapse. On our side, the leisure of a lot of money means we don't have to abuse our artists. Secondly, we also think that there's an obvious quantity wank here. 1 billion people are benefited by Taylor Swift. If they are the people who opted into the contract, who we deprioritize because they can leave if things hit the fan or hurt, we care about them less. Let's talk about music quality. Oh, the beautiful aspects of culture. No. A few things on this. First of all, maybe I'm a basic bitch, but when I was, before this round, I like listening to Benson Boone and to Doja Cat, which most people listen to. Insofar as the OG analysis says, we cater to what most people want, we cater to what most people want, which means quantity weight. They try to say, but we explore new niches. But also if we develop Benson Boone and offer more concerts to Drake, and so a yacht can hear another album by Kendrick that he can tell me about for 40 minutes because he's being funded by Warner Bruce, that's another way in which we answer mainstream taste. So why inherently prefer new niches is completely unclear insofar as they themselves say that we prefer the mainstream taste. But the second and obvious response is, how do you spread to new niches if you don't have money? These are places in which there are less developed artists than classical music in Japan that was only developed through Ishiguro when we were able to invest in the development of a conservatorium in Japan through Warner Bruce because they identified people like classic music and wanted to tap into that niche. If you add a consumer base, you might want to invest in it as well. It's not clear why it's mutually exclusive in the way that OG analyzed this. Let's now talk about money. What are the responses on money? First of all, I want to explain why our case is very simple, because it can stand on either one of the 3 legs I'll explain now. 1, we say small or poor. 2, wealthy or rich. 3, money is good. Even if we don't prove that they will collapse, even if we don't prove that the wealthy are much wealthier, more money is good and gets more of a scale of the impact that Ayaz talks about. More artists that we discover for the new niches that they want. More ability to be affordable on the kinds of things and brand deals that we sell to Spotify. We don't need to prove that there is no money on their side. But let's respond directly to what they tell us. The bidding war with Spotify is over because they've already won. Yes, but if Sony denies giving them access, that's when Spotify starts making massive losses because people like Taylor Swift aren't featured on their platform. So they have to stop price gouging, which they would do to smaller producers, in which the harm on them wouldn't be that big, which means we're able to reap much more massive profits and redivide that to artists which they so want. Secondly, they say piracy isn't a problem. What the fuck? More and more people are engaged in YouTube every day. More and more pirated videos are shown in screenings that can't be legislated against and scrutinized, which means we have all of the maintenance costs of music, the constant production we have to do to keep consumers engaged, but we get a small chunk of the market profit, and even that market profit are the small amounts of profits you get in view counts. This is why we need the money of a corporation that also gets brand deals from Black Panther, as they say. The money from a corporation that is able to not lose out to Spotify and the amount of profits that they get from the songs. Otherwise, how do they even spread the music quality concerts they want to talk about? Which is the first way for this case. On simple logical precedents. If I'm only able to hold one concert a year, and I have to price my tickets at $25, and I have to do it at Tokyo, as opposed to having the artist do a tour, their consumers are only going to be the ones that can anyway listen to music, the ones that are only geographically able to access that. On our side, we get some new niches, even if not the same niches they get, but at least people can access them and enjoy that art. Similarly, the people who can't afford a Spotify subscription will be able on our side when it's made to be cheaper. Second half.
What's very unclear in top half is how these record labels became as big as they are. So could you please just give us any reason why Sony became Sony to begin with?
Because they bought out music producers that by OG concession were much smaller before that, because they are local, have a specific language, and don't have name recognition internationally. They were much smaller, only on our side to get big. Let's talk about competition. First, Sony and Warner Bros. And the third example in the info slide are 3 different companies. You know what's the beauty of 3 different companies? They compete. Let's talk about why that's true. They say, but you want to curtailize the market, you want to just set prices that are similarly low, but that are similarly high. The problem with this is a few things. One, even if you set prices that are high across the market, you can still be called out for outpricing your songs. That is a problem, because it means that you as Warner Bros. Are going to produce a new movie, but now consumers have bad name recognition for you, because you're the reason that it's hard for them to access your Spotify subscription, which is why they're more likely to tilt towards other movie studios like Paramount. This means that as a company like Sony that bought a music producer, your incentive is not to antagonize the consumer, because sure, you might get a bit more money. What you want to do is, though, not make the consumer think that you're the one borrowing them, which is why cartelizing doesn't happen. But secondly, it's also because you never know if the other company will dump prices at some point. You never know if Sony will decide to release a new sale, which will make people flow to it and get a Sony subscription for a year, which means that you as Warner Bros. Will be fucked up. Which is why the best way for a large corporation to assure that they maintain consumers, both in music and outside, is by setting prices as low as possible to compete with the other agents on the market. But the second thing that I want to notice here is also how easy it is to hold them accountable, even if they do bad things towards artists. Because you know what's true about 3 corporations? There are 3. On their side, they have a music studio or a label for each small town that they can see to. They have local art. Those studios have more risk and more to benefit from abusing their artists. Oh yes, okay. For all those reasons,
Thank you very much for the hello. Very happy to call member of the government.
Are we good? Opening opposition says OG is out, because the comparative is one where you still would have had very big ones that would have just outcompeted the small ones. Then in responding to the POI, they say the only reason why we have big ones to begin with is because they consume the small ones. So the case I'm going to give to you in closing government is that you probably wouldn't have had any particular one become as big as they did in order to control not 1/4 of the music industry, but the fucking infos like 70% of the music industry.
I'm going to talk to you about what happened to Britney Spears, what happened to Taylor Swift, and what happened to Paul McCartney. Individuals who have to pay millions of dollars every time they sing the music that they themselves created, because the only way that they could get their music distributed to begin with is if they went to platforms that told them, look, I'm going to get the rights to whatever you're creating, because you have no other fucking option. The last thing I'm going to say at the top is, surprise, surprise, this is a fucking regrets motion, which means that we have to debate even before Spotify and before YouTube. Why was this good when the only option you had was distributing CDs and distributing like vinyls before this happened? I'm going to talk to you about the millions of artists that were destroyed. Because OO runs an insane case. The more strategic OO would have been to say, look, at least you can put your music on Spotify, and therefore that is good. Instead, they ran Spotify-based shit. But the reason why Spotify-based shit is forgone is because the only thing that you can do is to go to Spotify, because Spotify knows that it is very hard to access the big three, and so you have to come to me. YouTube doesn't pay good because you have to go to YouTube. So obviously they are the problem that they're trying to target in OO. They are so out of this debate. The first thing that I would like to note is that the counterfactual is profoundly unclear in opening government, as opening opposition notes. Why would the comparative be Sony just like being as small as just like the same as the small ones? I think it's probably true that in some instances some would have been bigger to an extent. I don't know why in opening opposition, but I'm going to assume that this is the case and outcompete the smaller ones. The way that we tackle this is with the following extension. Merging smaller labels was a blatant elimination of your competition. You took indie or black music and didn't develop it. And it is for a different mechanism from opening up. Because if you look at your notes, opening up said, you popify them. How, why, I don't even know what that means. It specifically looks like you give them less money for concerts. You give them less money for distribution. It means that when you are a record company, what historically happened is that Sony, for example, would go to the local shops where they sold CDs, and they would pay them money for some artists to be at the front of these shelves. And in many instances what this meant is, obviously, if the majority of like people who you already know are buying white music, you would just prioritize that white music. To be very clear, on our side you don't just randomly have like white people loving jazz. Well, obviously it's a lot more likely to happen for the simple reason that you do not have as much lobbying power. Like you literally don't upfront have as much money to just pay the store to have a particular artist at the front. Competition has to do its thing, and as society liberalizes, as society becomes more diverse, as homogenization occurs, it is a lot more likely that this happens. And I think that is one of the most simple, more direct mechanisms where this occurs. Why is so much leverage bad? I want to give you 4 reasons. Number 1, because if an artist has an issue with a record label, say for example, and this is super common, like you know about these examples, like you get sexually assaulted by the head of like Sony, or you get racially profiled by Sony. There's literally no one else you can go to. So this is a simple argument about employment. Like I think in the vast majority of other markets, you have a lot more people that you can go to. And no opening opposition concedes that even if smaller, there will be more people that you can go to because there will be less, there will be like less very big ones, which means that instead of 3, you'll probably have like 10, 20, 30 that are at least like bigger than they are currently. And so I think that in the vast majority of instances, this means that people can collectively bargain, that you can hold these companies accountable, that you have more options within the market. You remember when U2 downloaded this like fucking terrible album on your phone without asking to. And the reason why they could do that with Apple Music is because they had so much money to just pay Apple to just put a fucking album in you. And the response to this is laughable. Because opening opposition says, I don't know if I'm a basic bitch, but I like this music. Dog, no one said the music was bad, but it's that the preference was set for you, that you probably also would have liked if you stepped out culturally to like black artists, to like Mexican artists, to like Polish artists, or anyone else that is not the artist that they describe. I do not think this to the extent that Omar says, because I don't think anyone knows the artist other than Doja Cat that Omar described, but I think what is true is that in the majority of instances, this would have been likely to rise. I do think there is a subset of the population that for years would have liked indie music, but if you live in the developing world and all you have access to is like physical discs and Apple Music, and it is just not available in there, you are fucked. On our side of the house, there is a lot more incentives to put it out there. The second reason is they have massive leverage, the third mechanism is that they have massive leverage in terms of how diverse music is. And here's where I want to be different from opening government, although they do hint at this. Opening opposition says, people like the music. Opening government essentially says, like, on our side, we just somehow have more diverse music. The main thing that I want to note is, on opposition, you grab potential and you make it into what the market wants. That's why they went for Justin Bieber, because the reason Sony had is this is a handsome white boy that we can transform into exactly what we want. And so we are crafting you. We are using artists. We are giving them the songs. In many instances, we give you the lyrics such that we can actually target what the market wants. That is the actual explanation. That is why the info slide says that in many instances they favor individual artists as opposed to groups. On our side of the house, you first have to find your identity, your music, and then these record labels have to compete for you, which means that they pay better, which means that in many instances they are more diverse, which means that individuals have a lot more access to different types of music. The more important thing that I would note here is that in many instances, some artists themselves become so crucial to the record label that they have massive bargaining power as well. And this is totally new in the debate. Before I explain this,
Spotify, Apple Music, and YouTube Premium all must maintain contracts with the three big studios in order to not fall behind in the competition, just like the big three must maintain their headliner artists in order to maintain brand name, quality features, and incentives.
yeah, it is correct. This is just straight up correct. To be clear, the vast majority of this debate, Spotify and all those things didn't exist. The second thing that I would note is that's the fucking point. He just repeated my argument. When you are a record label, Spotify needs to cater to you, and so you have massive power over which songs, over which artists are shown in the weekly mix, and so that's literally the fucking problem. The POI is correct. So what happens when Rodriguez, who was a very famous artist in the United States that a documentary was done for, approached Sony? They told him you sound too similar to Bob Dylan, and he's currently the face of the corporation, so he can't fit you in. Rodriguez was famous as fuck in apartheid South Africa because his music was very powerful for the revolution. Well, the reason why Americans never heard of him is because these big corporations just didn't think it was a good marketing move. What happens on our side of the house is that you're obviously competing, and the way in which you beat the competition is by being more diverse instead of just agreeing, as opening comment is correct about, in an oligopoly. What happens on our side of the house is that in the majority of instances, you can no longer have an artist just going to the head of the board and just say, don't hire this artist because he's too similar to me. And in the vast majority of instances, if that person isn't hired there, they're fucked because they control 70%. On our side of the house, they can just go to one of the many other alternatives that there are. And that is the particular mechanism. Competition is a lot better. For those reasons, very proud of it.
Thank you very much, member of the government. Very happy to call member of the opposition.
We are going to prove why the fact that music became more internationalized, and why specifically the fact that range of music came from like a niche country into the American like mainstream music is so crucial. Note that OO did mention this idea with K-pop, but they never actually proved to you why like why actually alternatively you cannot get this recognition without those big companies. They do not explain, and they never explain why it actually do, why it actually crucial, etc. One thing about before. I do think that like this whole idea of so much power of one artist that coming from CG is weird from two reasons. First of all, we actually think that there is a huge company like Sony, which has 30% of like all artists in the world. No artists have much more bargaining power against them. We think it actually really falls on our side. But secondly, and very crucially, we definitely think that a lot of like small companies are going to emerge. There still exist. If I as an artist want to go to something like niche because I really don't, from some weird reason, cannot handle the three big one, okay, I can still go to a smaller one. That's completely fine. The question is where most artists should be. I don't think their case is relevant. I will start my point. Okay, why do you think that the main characterization of this emerging is actually big American companies which are buying smaller ones? Three reasons for that. First of all, we think that they actually would like to appeal to a white audience. Actually, here we definitely disagree with what OG said. We think they have all incentive in the world to be able to like appeal to all type of niche, and they are very likely to want to actually buy a small like office or something like that in practically every country in the world in order to be relevant for for those audience. Secondly, it just costs them less money. It's very, very crucial. I'm an American. American salaries are very, very high. Salaries in Spain are very, very low. I just prefer to open it that because I need to pay to each artist less money and I can still gain from him by making international much more. It's very high, which is good. But thirdly, we think because there is competition between those three ones, you need to edge in different markets in order to win your two big competitors. While alternatively, it's actually the only way. This thing does a very crucial thing, which is the fact that small artists can actually go to international fair, like a company. This is very, very crucial because we think that in the alternative, you go to a local one, which you will never be able to get any international recognition. This is due to three reasons, which we definitely haven't been given by opening opposition. First of all, the fact that the fact that just local companies don't know how to even get to an international audience. This is very, very crucial. They don't have even, many of them cannot do some with, I don't know, they can take small singer from, Spain, giving him, some song with Eminem or something, and then everyone will know him in a second. They have a lot of ability for that. But we think that secondly, the fact they have a lot of fucking money that they can put on advertising is something that really can uniquely be done by something which is that international. On the counter factor, you would really try to fight for any amount of recognition, but you will never be able to actually get it, or actually a really, really small amount to it. I will take over.
The artists that get the money and publicity and opposition are the privileged ones with marketable characteristics, whereas the larger quantity of smaller artists that cannot cater to niche taste get knocked out of the market.
I will answer the
later.
I'll do it. Okay, I will answer that later. We think that this is first of all crucial because of the audience. Here, definitely, OGPO is incredible. We think that in the world with a huge amount of population of immigrant people who live in a country where they are not the majority. This is very crucial for four different reasons. First of all, we think that when I actually hear a lot of international music, let's say I don't know, a song like Gangnam Style has exploded, Despacito, I don't know, something like that, I first of all just feel much more appreciating toward my music. This is incredibly crucial because many times I'm in a time in my life where I feel quite isolated. And the fact that many people appreciate the music which I like makes me just feel much better with myself and more appreciated. But secondly, it creates just more awareness of my culture. It means that people more learn my language. Because if I'm really like Spanish artist, then I will start to understand some Spanish. But we think that rather than that, I just understand more about the culture. Let's say if I really like K-pop, then I'll probably learn about, I don't know, something about Korea, about a culture of more discipline, competition, etc. And I just more understand people and their background. But thirdly, and very, very crucially, we think it really just make people with less bad stereotypes. The fact that you appreciate people from different background than you makes them automatically less demonized. They make them something which could be very, very good, which could be some role model, which is great. But the thing that fourthly, just give you a feeling of something which is your home. Many people miss their home. They miss the sound that they heard when they were kids. They miss the fact of feeling something which is very, very similar and not foreign to them. We think this is incredibly crucial in this point that you start to hear much more in United States, in Europe, just the music which is unnative to this population, very, very crucial for those people. But we think that rather that it's actually also good for the artists because we think that government currently is quite paternalistic. What artists want is international recognition. They are willing to get really shitty recognition for their really small chance to actually become international. Maybe this is what they want, and we like to take care about them, in the way that they specifically want that. We definitely need a team that prove it. But we think that much more crucially, it just really helps this audience of people which are foreigners from many reasons. And we think it's really the most important impact in this round. Because first of all, I don't fucking know what is better music. Okay? I don't know what is a song which is level 5 and it's gets to 20% better. I have no idea what it even fucking means. Okay? We actually put really impact which are tangible on people. The fact that people are less stereotypic about them, the fact that they feel like it's their home is something which is really significantly more important. But we think that secondly, we think that just the level of asymmetry is much bigger in our case. And no, this is incredibly crucial. We think that the level of economy of scale that about less competition of government is absurd. There's still tens of like small studios which keep on appearing, even if I like merge some. You cannot merge all of them. It means there are always some competition. But still, and also there's still many big local studios in Korea, Spain, whatever, which are not the three biggest in the world. We think that those cases are really just quite symmetric. We've shown you why the only way where local studios will get recognition is by being bought by a bigger one with a lot of budget. We will take the local artists and make them actually international. We think this is the most changing thing in the motion, the most crucial thing in this motion. All of those reasons closing opposition.
Thank you very much to opposition member, and we're happy to call the government whip.
Very simple structure. Follow up, first respond to CEO, next engage with O, and finally behave and stuff up, right? CEO's like basic case is about the internationalization of music. I think they have like one really strong mechanism that they're talking about based on the fact that like local studio groups, and they don't really understand how to internationalize their music, and it's like the big three that are given the ability to actually go and do this, right? I think the first thing I want to question them on is what have they actually internationalized? Because what we've seen with regards to the big three doing is they've just Americanized what the global music culture is. I've never seen Spanish artists outside of maybe Shakira who've been given platforms to go and do concerts in places like India or go to places that are really like popular in other countries, right? I just don't know what the comparative actually looks like on their side, because they've actually never explained who are these artists that are platforms, who are these artists that are given the platform to go and internationalize their music, right? And I think I want to flip this. What is most likely to happen in their world, and what has happened now, is the big three reduces the internationalization of specific artists because they feel like they won't be popular. The point is on our comparative is like if you have like a really strong Spanish local like studio, they have the most incentives to go and publicize their artists because their main artist is the person they depend on fully, right? Like the big three, like maybe Universal has like 70 different artists who are really popular. So they won't popularize the Spanish artists, they just have 7 different like Taylor Swift concerts all the time because they know they can make the most money out of it. The third thing I want to note here is that it's more likely that in our world that you actually have the ability to internationalize because you don't outcompete the market, right? In their world, when the big three just has Travis Scott and like Taylor Swift concerts all the time in South Asia, it's really, really hard to compete it as an upcoming industry, as an upcoming studio, right? Because this means concert tickets go like, concert venue prices go up. This means that people have already spent money on the Taylor Swift concert, so they are willing to buy and go and spend money and watch a Spanish upcoming artist, right? So there's a trade-off that exists in all of these worlds. It's genuinely unclear how this happens. But fourth, I think the comparative is very clear. Internationalization would have happened anyway and would have happened much faster because the internet is the reason why internationalization happened. The way most artists get internationalized, they go viral on things like TikTok, they go viral on things like Instagram, and people understand that they need to. They want to go and watch these artists, right? So they give signals to these studios, right? So if you're like talking about Drake's studio, one of Drake's artists go viral, there'll be multiple comments saying, when are you coming to UK? When are you coming to Ireland? When are you going to do a concert here? All of this would have happened specifically more on our side because there'll be more artists who have been publicized, the hegemony of the big three would have been taken down. Let's engage with O, right? First I'll respond to the auxiliary claims about like economies of scale, and then I'll respond to the big claim about like leverage, right? With regards to economies of scale, I just genuinely don't know how this materializes in their world, or like and why this is a good thing, because the problem, even if they're correct with regards to these things about like the price reducing, I don't think it's really good for artists, right? Because I think specialization with regards to dealing with artists like music is inherently a good thing, because what happens in their world is the big three has like the same three producers and the same three discography directors doing all the music. It just reduces the quality of the artists and the ability to actually be differentiated in the market because you have the same trends that are going there. Let's engage with the biggest part of their case then with regards to like the problem of leverage, right? I think Manuel already deals with this. The reason why Spotify and YouTube is so shit right now, and the reason why you're forcing to go and take bad deals is because they have no other options. Because the other three options are the big three who are controlling you and have massive leverage in you. I want to be very clear, even in their best case. Even in their best case, the big three cares of you as artists and want to give you a good deal that only happen for the most popular artists. They have no incentive to get the small and upcoming artists and and lobby for them because they don't really care for you. You have no incentive as a result because they are important for your market, right? So they'll give Taylor Swift a really good deal with Apple Music. They'll give Taylor Swift a really good deal with Spotify. But I don't know whether small upcoming artists will get all that leverage power, right? Because they aren't important for the value of the company. But I want to be very clear about the comparative, right? The comparative is smaller, like so. Just because if they're smaller doesn't mean these are not $1 million studios as well, right? They are really massive studios who are really powerful to leverage. The comparative is just you have an incentive to platform your artists more because you have fewer artists that are important for you as an industry. You don't have millions of artists from around the world who are important. You need to platform and prioritize, right? That means only the most powerful, powerful and popular people get popularity and are benefited. The other people get fucked over. Our comparative is simple. You just don't have that because the few artists who are in your studio are really important. But the second piece I want to talk about with regards to leverage is about the shit conditions most artists have to go through. I'll take you like a minute, right? What has happened with Taylor Swift? Why do you think she's releasing 7 different Taylor's versions? It's because the studio has control over the rights of her music. So she can't go and do with it what she wants to. She can't go and do concerts in the way she wants to and maybe utilize her platforms in the way she wants to. This is the whole problem with people like Britney Spears as well, right? She wasn't even able to sing and make music videos about her music because Sony had control over her music rights. I think it's incredibly problematic and it's like a blatant violation of your intellectual property because these companies have so much leverage. The comparative is very, very clear. You don't have that massive amount of leverage against smaller companies because you have optionality now. Giving you optionality and more optionality is genuinely a good thing, right? They say, 3 is good. No, but these organizations collaborate. It's so much easier to collaborate when there's 2 other people to collaborate and price goals, right? You just have to negotiate with 2 other people. They're going to say, they're going to increase our prices, they're going to fuck over our artists, help us do this. Maybe when you need our help, we're going to do the same thing as well. That is why artists don't have this optionality. Yeah, we'll go ahead.
Ghost never proved that 3 companies don't compete, given we show that they care about maintaining their headliner artists and their good name. Even if they do, sometimes companies are bad, but they will always lack money on their side. This is the certainty way for OO's claim.
I don't understand this money issue, right? Money is symmetric, but the pool of money around music is symmetric. It is about how it is distributed with regard to companies that is comparative. All we are saying is more companies existing means their benefit of money is existing. Competition means there's more accountability on these companies as well. What are the working conditions things that Manuel talks about that are incredibly important for artists? I think this is very, very simple, right? Artists are forced into shit conditions without getting any ability to find recourse because they have no other optionality. This means you just are forced to go to the sexual assault in a manager that you're forced to work with because you have no option. I think this is also intensity, just simply based off against OG because it's unclear as to why the intensity of OG's impact with regard to specific artists is so important, right? The final thing then, with regard to up and coming artists, right? I think it's simply more likely that up and coming artists will get more opportunities with bigger labels and with more platforms insofar as the strongest artists in these big 3 don't leverage and negotiate their platforms not to platform them, right? The example Manuel talks about is incredibly important because even within these, the whole reason that Opten says Taylor Swift gets more popularity is the reason why she would want a new up and coming pop artist to get popularity and get a platform. This is the reason why new up and coming artists get fucked over. I think comparative is very, very simple. Competition is good. Competition means artists get better conditions. All other reasons.
Thank you very much to the government whip and very happy to call the opposition whip.
Starting in 3, 2, 1. Let's ask the question of where do we actually and who do we appeal to on each side? Where are the incentives to go after which population and to create those niche topics or whatever? I think this is already the metric that we get from a lot of government's teams, especially OG. And in that sense, by winning that and showing a massive problem of their case, we will win over governments. Also, I will show why that is more important than anything that we got from OO and is actually logically prior and in ensuring we help both locally and internationally musicians and people enjoy music or whatever. Who do we actually appeal to on these sites? Governments say to us, okay, they have, as a local studio or whatever, I'm more likely to go niche. The problem there is they really severely lack mechanisms on why that's likely. Why is it likely that I actually make local music when I'm a local studio and so on? They just say, oh, it seems like there's some kind of market there, but why can't they go globally as well? 3 mechanisms why they are much likely on their side to actually go to the international market and so on. First of all, greed. They see a massive amount of money that can be potentially created in those instances. That means that if they are in a $100,000 debt, which happens a lot of the times to a lot of these studios, they need a big win right now, meaning they just can't afford it to go locally and say, okay, maybe this will work, maybe this will not work. People haven't done this enough. I have to get a big win. I'm dreaming all the time of being that big studio label that gets the next artist and the next superstar, meaning that all the time I'm going to the thing that appeals to the most amount of people. Secondly, on the thing that it seems actually risky to go locally. That means that it's scary to make something that only maybe appeals to a small amount of people. Meaning it seems like I have much more chances if I go more globally or in the country itself. Meaning if I have more chances of populations to introduce this music to the first place. If I can actually go to more radio stations and not only the radio station that puts out this music in the first place, it actually seems to be less risky to go globally, to go like English music or go sounds that people are more familiar with globally. See the good music on both sides, and on both sides, the thing that most people hear is going to be music in English. This happened way before all these studios actually were in that. The USA is just much more bigger and actually creates probably better music, no matter how like 70% of the market or whatever. That means that all the time the music that I hear in the first place is, and the most popular music is music that is derived from the American culture and so on. Meaning that when I actually think about what I want to do, what I think the market locally will also want and like the most, I actually think that the best way to do that is going by a global sense. On our side, we think that changes. We think that the small studios actually have an incentive to say, look, I can't compete with fucking Sony, I have to do something else. I have to do something that can actually win me big. I can't really compete with such a big industry that is such a strong contender in the market. I know that there is a studio down the street that is owned by Sony, and they just have much better equipment, they just have much better things. This means that I understand in the first place that I can't compete with them and I actually have to go niche. Meaning if they say to us, and if we buy their analysis of why the Sony and so on will actually go only globally and not locally, we think that in that sense, at least the smaller markets and the smaller studios do have an intention to do that much more on our side. But we don't buy that. We think that we show you why also on a global scale there is going to be much more international music. What we hear on that thing, tells you, first of all, that there's competition between the big studios, so they look for niche things to win in. They also tell us that on the comparative, they say that the local studios don't have enough money to take risks on the weirder things. We think that the problem with that is that all relies on competition, which is obviously not true in a lot of places in the first place. Well, like probably a lot of these studios do control markets in different places, but also when they explain the comparative, they just lack a lot of mechanisms and just assert most of the things that they say. I have no idea if it's really hard and if you need so much money or how risky is it really to go on these senses. Well, it gives you exactly this, that you have to understand the market of art overall, that you have to get what you can actually create on a global market, that I have to understand in order to do better what is more appealing also to the crowd itself. What we tell you in this sense, that it doesn't matter if that crowd is in China, India, or the USA, the companies know the tactics in order in the first place to bring that music out. They know both the ideas of the advertisements. They know all the things about which writers they should go on and already have probably deals with them and actually understand them. They also have the knowledge of what music in the first place is going to go, even in a local scale, better than the local companies themselves. Meaning, even if it's better to actually go to the local music, that is what people actually like more and so on, they are likely to do so, but also on a global market, they are much more likely to bring international music and actually go for these things and show and actually have a chance of the Korean music to work in the USA in the first place. Sure, I'll take first.
The issue is here, internationalization never reaches its activation point because the big three make Spanish artists sing in English and you never prove why people want to go international and not just have Patreon.
Two things that I'm going to say about this. The first is, I have no idea why is it bad that Spanish are singing in English. At least we get some of the Spanish ideas in that sense. But also we think that it's just not true. We think that a lot of the music that we hear right now is Korean, Japanese, Spanish, French. We do hear a lot of ideas and sounds that are happening in the status quo. I don't really understand that idea. Why is this so important that we show you this extension? We think that first of all, it actually shows you a lot of the time where the artists actually get more and actually can show what they feel in the first place. We think that on both sides, once they bring out their first album, also in the big studios, they now have a bargaining tool, either saying I won't bring an album at all, or just go to the different big studio. In that sense, they always have that bargaining tool to say, okay, I do want to put that song that I want in that album, I do want to mix in a little of different things. Those are things that can't happen on a local level because in the first place they can't get to that level of bargaining power. They can't get to that level of big, and the local companies don't actually trust them in the first place. We think that is important, and also how we show you we affect everybody around. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for this round. As you know, this is a closed round. You can find us after break announcement to grab some feedback. Thank you so much. Best of luck for the rest of the round.
Thank you.
Problem.